The massive crystalline dome of the Galactic Council stretched impossibly high above the Judgment Chamber, its transparent walls revealing the endless expanse of space beyond. Ambassador David Kane stood perfectly still in the defendant's circle, a single human figure dwarfed by the colossal architecture surrounding him. The chamber itself could have housed entire cities, yet every surface amplified sound with perfect clarity, ensuring that even the softest whisper would reach the furthest seats. Thousands of alien representatives filled the tiered seating that spiraled upward like an amphitheater built for gods. Crystalline beings from the Helix Nebula reflected light in prismatic rainbows. Tentacled creatures from the outer rim writhed in complex patterns that served as their language. Gas cloud entities hovered in specialized containment fields, their forms shifting and pulsing with bioluminescent communication. Insectoid delegates clicked and chittered from their elevated platforms, while massive beings that resembled living mountains communicated through subsonic vibrations that made the floor tremble. Every eye, sensor, and detection apparatus in the chamber focused on the lone human below. David adjusted his simple black diplomatic uniform, seemingly unbothered by the cosmic court assembled around him. His calm demeanor stood in stark contrast to the magnitude of the accusations about to be leveled against his entire species. High Chancellor Voltus of the Dominion Empire rose from the central throne, a towering figure whose four arms spread wide in a gesture of authority. His voice boomed through universal translators positioned throughout the chamber, the sound carrying the weight of absolute power. The species known as humanity stands accused of the most heinous crime recognized by galactic law, the unprovoked declaration of war against a peaceful civilization. Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates, a symphony of alien languages that the translators struggled to process simultaneously. The gravity of the situation was not lost on anyone present. In the 3,000 years since the Galactic Council's establishment, no species had ever dared to challenge the Dominion Empire directly. Voltus continued, his voice growing more severe with each word. Humans claim to be a peaceful species seeking membership in our ancient council. Yet within mere days of our empire's routine diplomatic contact with your primitive world, you launched the most coordinated and devastating military campaign in recorded galactic history. Holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing evidence that sent shockwaves through the alien audience. Human warships emerged from hyperspace like ghosts, their sleek designs unlike anything in known galactic databases. The footage showed devastating attacks on Dominion outposts that had stood unconquered for millennia. Entire star systems fell within hours, their defenses crumbling before weapons that defied conventional understanding. The assembled aliens watched in horror as the holographic evidence played out before them. Dominion battle fleets, or the most feared military force in the galaxy, were systematically dismantled with surgical precision. Space stations that housed millions were evacuated and destroyed so quickly that panic never had time to set in. The tactical coordination displayed was beyond anything most species could achieve after centuries of military evolution. Your barbarism knows no bounds, Voltus declared, his mechanical voice translator failing to fully convey the rage behind his words. You obliterated defensive positions that protected countless innocent lives. You showed no mercy, no honor, no respect for the ancient laws that govern civilized warfare. David stepped forward slightly, his movement drawing the attention of every being in the massive chamber. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried clearly to every corner of the dome. Your Honor, with all due respect, you seem to have fundamentally misunderstood the timeline of events. The human ambassador reached into his diplomatic pouch and withdrew a small device. As he activated it, new holographic data began to appear alongside the Dominion's evidence. The contrast was immediately apparent. These recordings bore different timestamps, different perspectives, and told a completely different story. What you describe as routine diplomatic contact, David continued, his voice growing colder, was actually the systematic extermination of every human colony world your empire encountered over the past 50 years. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Even the ambient sounds of alien breathing and mechanical life support systems seemed to pause as the implications of this statement sank in. Voltus's confident posture wavered slightly, though he quickly attempted to regain his composure. Impossible, the Chancellor declared. Our diplomatic protocols are Classified as Evaluation Procedure 77 Alpha, David interrupted, his calm demeanor never wavering. Standard protocol for newly discovered species. Initial contact followed by systematic testing of military capabilities, technological advancement, and cultural resistance to subjugation. Species that pass the evaluation are offered vassalage. Those that fail are eliminated to prevent future threats. New holographic displays materialized, showing detailed records that could only have come from the Dominion's own classified databases. The alien delegates leaned forward in shock as they witnessed the truth behind first contact procedures that had been hidden from the Council for decades. The recording showed Dominion ships arriving at peaceful human colonies under the banner of diplomacy. Initial contact scenarios that began with promises of friendship and technological exchange quickly revealed their true purpose, as the aliens systematically cataloged human defenses, studied their technology, and evaluated their potential as either slaves or threats. 53 colonies, David stated, each word falling like a hammer blow in the silent chamber. Over 2 million human beings, men, women, and children who welcomed your ships with hope for a peaceful future among the stars. The holographic evidence showed the aftermath of these evaluations. Once the Dominion determined that human military capabilities were insufficient to pose a future threat, the systematic elimination began. Entire populations were sterilized from orbit, their final transmissions filled with confusion and pleas for mercy that never came. You tested our defenses, David continued, walking slowly around the defendant's circle as horrified gasps rippled through the alien audience. You cataloged our weapons. You studied our tactics. You even took prisoners for biological analysis. Every colony that fell taught you more about humanity's strengths and weaknesses. Voltus stumbled backward, his forearms gesturing frantically. These records are impossible to obtain. They're encrypted with quantum flux algorithms that would take any known species 10,000 years to crack. David smiled for the first time since entering the chamber, but it was a cold expression that sent waves of unease through the assembled delegates. You're absolutely correct, Chancellor. For any known species, that timeline would be accurate. The human ambassador paused at the center of the defendant's circle, his gaze sweeping across the thousands of alien faces watching him. Which brings us to the first lesson your empire failed to learn about humanity. We don't just adapt to survive. We excel under pressure. A new holographic display appeared, showing Earth's solar system as it existed 50 years ago. A single inhabited world with primitive spacefaring capabilities. Then the image shifted to show the current state of human expansion, revealing a sight that defied everything the galactic community thought they knew about the species standing trial. While your scouts were busy evaluating our colony defenses, David explained, we were busy as well, learning your languages, mapping your territories, studying your military tactics, and breaking your most secure encryption systems. The evidence was undeniable. Human intelligence networks had penetrated every level of Dominion society. Communication intercepts, strategic plans, even the personal correspondence of high-ranking officials, all of it had been systematically acquired and analyzed over decades of careful intelligence gathering. We gave your empire every opportunity to engage in honest diplomacy, David continued. Every chance to approach Earth directly and begin legitimate negotiations. Instead, you chose to treat humanity like laboratory specimens in an experiment to determine our worthiness to survive. The chamber remained frozen in stunned silence as the full scope of human intelligence capabilities became apparent. Species that had considered themselves technologically superior suddenly realized they had been observed, analyzed, and ultimately outmaneuvered by what they had dismissed as a primitive civilization. David's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The moment your empire decided that humanity wasn't worth preserving, we made our own decision about the Dominion's future in this galaxy. The council chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien voices as representatives frantically communicated with their home governments through quantum encrypted channels. The revelation that humanity had been systematically infiltrating Dominion intelligence networks for decades sent shockwaves through species that had considered their own security measures impenetrable. David, Kane activated another sequence of holographic displays, and the evidence that materialized caused even more chaos among the assembled delegates. The new recordings showed human intelligence operations spanning multiple star systems, with surveillance networks that had been observing galactic politics for far longer than anyone had imagined possible. 53 colonies weren't just victims, David explained, his voice cutting through the alien chatter with crystalline clarity. They were our forward observation posts. Every attack your empire launched gave us unprecedented access to Dominion military doctrine, weapons technology, and strategic planning. The holographic evidence showed the truth behind the colony massacres. Hidden recording devices captured Dominion forces in action, revealing tactical procedures that had been classified at the highest levels of their military hierarchy. Human observers, concealed in bunkers and underground facilities, documented everything from weapons capabilities to communication protocols. High Chancellor Voltus struggled to maintain his composure as the implications became clear. You used your own people as bait. Sacrificed them for intelligence gathering. We sacrificed nothing, David replied coldly. Your empire made the choice to eliminate civilian populations. We simply ensured their deaths served a greater purpose, the survival of our entire species. The chamber's atmosphere grew heavy with tension as new recordings played, showing the final moments of human colonies. But these weren't the helpless victims the Dominion believed they had destroyed. Hidden cameras revealed sophisticated evacuation procedures, with civilian populations retreating to concealed shelters while military observers remained behind to document the attacks. Every weapon you fired was recorded and analyzed, David continued. Every tactical formation was studied and countered. Every communication frequency was monitored and decoded. Your empire spent 50 years teaching us exactly how to destroy you. Admiral Krex of the Hegemony Fleet, a crystalline being whose body refracted light into complex patterns, spoke with obvious disbelief. The coordination required for such intelligence gathering, no single species could achieve this level of organization without massive infrastructure. David nodded toward the Admiral. You're absolutely correct. Which is why we didn't limit ourselves to a single world. The holographic displays shifted to show the true scope of human expansion, revealing a sight that redefined everything. The galactic community thought they knew about humanity's capabilities. The view expanded beyond Earth's solar system, exposing construction platforms hidden in the dark spaces between stars, massive industrial complexes built inside asteroid fields, and entire fleets assembled in regions of space that conventional sensors could never detect. While your attention was focused on our primitive homeworld, David explained, we were establishing the largest covert industrial network in galactic history. Dark matter manipulation allowed us to construct facilities that exist outside normal space-time detection parameters. The evidence was staggering. Automated mining operations harvested resources from rogue planets that drifted between star systems. Quantum tunneling manufacturing created ship components in pocket dimensions before assembling them in hidden shipyards. Entire human settlements had been established on worlds that galactic surveys had dismissed as uninhabitable, protected by atmospheric processors and underground cities that remained completely invisible to orbital detection. 50 years of preparation, David stated. 50 years of allowing the Dominion to believe they were hunting helpless prey, while we built the infrastructure necessary to ensure our species' survival. Science Coordinator Thex, a gas cloud entity whose thoughts manifested as shifting patterns of bioluminescence, pulsed with rapid color changes indicating extreme agitation. The technological advancement required, the industrial capacity. This would necessitate scientific breakthroughs in multiple fields simultaneously. Another lesson your empire failed to learn about humanity, David replied. We don't just adapt and survive. We innovate and excel. Every piece of Dominion technology you used against our colonies was reverse-engineered and improved upon. New holographic displays showed human research facilities that defied conventional understanding. Laboratory complexes built inside neutron star coronas, where extreme gravitational fields allowed for exotic matter experiments. Research stations positioned in galactic voids, where scientists could manipulate dark energy without interference from conventional matter. Theoretical physics had become practical engineering in humanity's desperate race for survival. Your weapons taught us about plasma dynamics, David continued. Your shields showed us force field manipulation. Your faster-than-light drives revealed the secrets of space-time compression. Every attack was a teaching moment that brought us closer to technological superiority. The assembled delegates watched in horrified fascination as the recordings revealed the true extent of human scientific advancement. Technologies that should have taken centuries to develop had been mastered in decades through the systematic analysis of Dominion military equipment recovered from colony attack sites. But technology alone wasn't enough, David said, his expression growing more serious. The Dominion Empire controls thousands of worlds, commands millions of ships, and has military traditions spanning millennia. Even with superior technology, humanity couldn't hope to match your numbers or experience. Voltus seized on this admission, his confidence partially returning. Then you admit the futility of your actions. Your species may have achieved temporary tactical advantages, but the Empire's resources are infinite. Surrender now and perhaps Which brings us to the third lesson your Empire failed to learn, David interrupted, his voice carrying a new edge of dangerous certainty. Humanity doesn't just adapt and innovate. We unite. The holographic displays shifted once more, showing communication networks that spanned the entire human expansion. Every ship, every station, every hidden facility was connected in a vast web of instantaneous quantum communication. But more than mere technology was revealed. The displays showed the human response to the Dominion's genocidal evaluation procedures. Every person who died in your Empire's tests had family, David explained. Brothers and sisters, parents and children, friends and colleagues. Their deaths didn't scatter us in fear. They forged us into something this galaxy has never witnessed before. An entire species united by a single, unshakable purpose. The evidence showed refugee processing centers where survivors from destroyed colonies were integrated into the hidden human expansion. Children orphaned by Dominion attacks grew up in underground military academies, trained from birth to fight the war their parents hadn't lived to see. Entire generations had been raised with one goal, ensuring that humanity would never again face extinction at the hands of those who considered them disposable. Traditional military doctrine assumes that casualties reduce fighting effectiveness, David continued. For humanity, every loss only strengthened our resolve. Every destroyed colony became a rallying point. Every dead civilian became a name spoken in remembrance and sworn in vengeance. The chamber fell silent as the full implications became clear. This wasn't just a military campaign or a territorial dispute. This was a species-wide commitment to survival that had transformed every human being into a soldier in a war they had been preparing to fight for half a century. Your evaluation procedures determined that humanity lacked the military capability to pose a future threat, David said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. You were wrong, not because you misjudged our technology or underestimated our intelligence, but because you failed to understand what happens when an entire species faces extinction and refuses to accept it. Admiral Krex's crystalline form flickered with patterns of deep concern. The resources required for such coordination, the unity of purpose. No known species has ever achieved this level of collective organization. David's smile returned, but this time it carried something beyond cold calculation. It carried the pride of a species that had transcended every limitation placed upon it. Admiral, you're looking at humanity through the lens of your own experience. We don't operate according to known galactic patterns because we've been forced to evolve beyond them. The final holographic display showed the current state of the war that the Dominion believed they were fighting. Red indicators marking Dominion-controlled territory were rapidly being replaced by blue markers representing human-controlled space. But the transition wasn't random or chaotic. It followed a precise pattern that revealed the true scope of human strategic planning. The war you think we started without warning has been planned for 30 years, David announced. Emergency sessions erupted throughout the Galactic Council chambers as alien representatives frantically established secure communication links with their home governments. The revelation that humanity had been systematically preparing for galactic warfare, while appearing to be a naive, newly spacefaring species, had shaken the fundamental assumptions upon which interstellar politics operated. Council President Mira Theln of the Zenthari Collective called for order, her bioluminescent patches flashing in rapid sequences that indicated extreme stress. The Zenthari had served as neutral mediators in galactic conflicts for over 2 millennia, but nothing in their extensive diplomatic experience had prepared them for a situation where an entire species had spent decades planning a war that was already being won. Ambassador Kane, President Thelen began, her voice carrying the authority of her office despite the obvious strain. These revelations regarding the Dominion Empire's evaluation procedures are deeply disturbing. However, this council cannot and will not condone aggressive warfare regardless of provocation. If humanity ceases all military action immediately, we can arrange for mediated peace negotiations. No, the single word cut through the chamber like a neutron beam, silencing thousands of alien voices in an instant. David Kane stood perfectly motionless in the defendant's circle, his expression unchanged from the calm diplomatic mask he had maintained since entering the chamber. The simple refusal carried a weight that seemed to compress the very atmosphere around him. President Thelen, David continued, his voice respectful but implacable. With all due respect to this council's traditions and your own distinguished history of mediation, the time for negotiated settlements ended when the Dominion Empire chose systematic genocide over honest diplomacy. A three-dimensional tactical display materialized above the chamber, showing real-time fleet movements across dozens of star systems. The holographic representation revealed the current state of the conflict with stunning clarity. Human ships moving in perfect coordination, systematically dismantling Dominion infrastructure, while avoiding civilian populations with surgical precision that defied conventional military doctrine. We are not here seeking permission for our actions, David explained. We are here as a courtesy to inform the galactic community of our intentions before they affect the broader balance of power. Admiral Yex of the Hegemony Defense Fleet, a massive arthropod whose compound eyes could process tactical information at superhuman speeds, studied the display with growing amazement. This level of strategic coordination is impossible. No species achieves this degree of tactical unity without centuries of space warfare experience. David nodded respectfully toward the Admiral. You are absolutely correct, Admiral Yex. Humanity lacks the centuries of combat experience that built your own military traditions. We had something different: a desperation, and complete access to every major galactic conflict recorded in the past millennium. The tactical display zoomed in to show specific battles currently raging across Dominion space. Human forces employed tactics that seemed familiar yet wrong to the experienced military officers observing them. Strategies from famous historical conflicts were being executed with modern technology and modifications that improved upon the original implementations. While the Dominion was testing our colony defenses, David continued, we were studying every war your civilizations have ever fought. The Crevan expansion wars taught us how to counter energy-based shield systems. The Vorthan Rebellion showed us how to exploit supply line vulnerabilities in extended campaigns. The Third Hegemony conflict revealed the psychological impact of rapid territorial gains on enemy morale. The evidence was undeniable. Human forces were implementing battlefield tactics that drew from the entirety of galactic military history, but with innovations that their original creators had never imagined. Ancient strategies were being executed with technologies that hadn't existed when those battles were first fought, creating hybrid approaches that combined historical wisdom with cutting-edge capabilities. Every victory and every defeat in recorded galactic history became our textbook, David explained. We studied not just the tactics that succeeded, but more importantly, we analyzed the mistakes that led to failure. Our war plans were designed to avoid every documented strategic error while exploiting every known tactical advantage. Science coordinator Bela of the Research Collective, whose tentacled form writhed with nervous energy, spoke with obvious disbelief. The computational power required to analyze and synthesize military data, spanning a millennium of conflicts. The processing capabilities would exceed anything in known space. Which brings us to another fundamental misunderstanding about humanity's technological capabilities, David replied. You've been observing our public infrastructure while remaining completely unaware of our classified research programs. New holographic displays showed research facilities that challenged every assumption about human technological development. Quantum processing centers built inside black hole accretion disks, where the extreme gravitational fields allowed for computational speeds that approached theoretical maximums. Artificial intelligence networks distributed across multiple dimensions, processing tactical scenarios in parallel realities before implementing optimal solutions in real space. Traditional computing limitations don't apply when you're willing to work in environments that would destroy conventional technology, David explained. We built our strategic planning systems in places where space and time operate according to different rules. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the recordings revealed the true scope of human technological advancement. Research stations positioned at the edge of galactic supermassive black holes, where time dilation allowed for accelerated development cycles. Laboratory complexes built inside neutron star magnetospheres, where exotic matter could be manipulated under conditions impossible to replicate elsewhere. Your civilizations spent millennia developing these technologies gradually, building upon previous generations of scientific understanding. David continued. Humanity compressed that entire development cycle into 50 years of desperate innovation, driven by the knowledge that failure meant extinction. President Theln's bioluminescent pattern shifted to colors that indicated deep philosophical distress. The scale of deception required, maintaining the appearance of a primitive species while developing capabilities that exceed galactic standards. How many of your people were involved in this preparation? All of them. The answer sent waves of shocked silence through the chamber. David's expression remained calm, but his voice carried a new edge of fierce pride that resonated even through the universal translators. Every human being knew about the Dominion's evaluation procedures, he explained. Every man, woman, and child understood that their species faced extinction if we failed to meet the challenge. There were no civilians in humanity's war effort, because there could be no civilians when survival was at stake. New displays showed human society as it truly existed, a civilization that had transformed itself into the most effective military organization in galactic history, while maintaining the appearance of peaceful technological development. Children attended schools that were secretly military academies. Scientists worked in research facilities that doubled as weapons development centers. Farmers and miners operated supply chains that fed hidden fleets assembling in dark space. Traditional military doctrine assumes a distinction between military and civilian populations. David continued. Humanity eliminated that distinction because the Dominion's evaluation procedures threatened our entire species equally. Every person contributed to our survival effort because every person understood the consequences of failure. Admiral Yex's compound eyes focused on specific sections of the tactical display, analyzing troop movements and supply chains that revealed impossible levels of coordination. The logistics alone, coordinating resources across multiple star systems with this degree of efficiency. No known command structure could manage such complexity. You're thinking in terms of traditional hierarchical military organization, David replied. Humanity developed something different. Distributed command networks where every individual understands the strategic objective and can adapt to changing circumstances without waiting for orders from central authority. The evidence showed human military units operating with autonomy that would have been impossible under conventional command structures. Individual ship captains made tactical decisions that perfectly aligned with broader strategic goals. Ground forces adapted to unexpected situations while maintaining coordination with units they had never directly communicated with. The entire human war effort operated like a single organism with millions of components, working in perfect harmony. When every member of your species understands the mission and possesses the training to execute it independently, David explained, you don't need the complex command hierarchies that limit other military organizations. You create something that responds to threats faster than any traditional force can adapt to counter it. The tactical display updated in real time, showing the continued collapse of Dominion defensive positions. The Council Chamber's environmental systems worked overtime as hundreds of alien species released stress pheromones simultaneously, creating an atmospheric cocktail that even the advanced filtration systems struggled to process. The implications of David Kane's final statement reverberated through the assembled delegates like a seismic shockwave, fundamentally altering their understanding of humanity's role in galactic affairs. On the massive holographic displays surrounding the chamber, the tactical situation continued to evolve at a pace that defied conventional military understanding. Dominion strongholds that had withstood siege warfare for centuries were falling within hours. Space fortresses considered impregnable were being systematically dismantled by human forces that seemed to anticipate every defensive measure before it could be implemented. Science Coordinator, Telm of the Advanced Research Consortium, a being whose crystalline structure could process multiple data streams simultaneously, spoke with obvious distress. This level of military capability would require industrial capacity beyond anything our surveys detected in the Sol system. Our deep space reconnaissance showed primitive manufacturing centers, limited spacefaring infrastructure, basic resource extraction operations. David Kane moved slowly around the defendant's circle, his measured pace creating a rhythm that seemed to emphasize the gravity of each revelation. Coordinator Telm, your surveys were absolutely accurate in their observations. Earth itself could never support the kind of industrial capacity required for this military campaign. He paused at the center of the circle, his calm demeanor unchanged despite the cosmic implications of what he was about to reveal. But then, Earth was never intended to serve as humanity's primary industrial base. The holographic displays shifted to show the outer regions of the Sol system, expanding beyond the orbit of Pluto into the dark spaces that conventional sensors had always reported as empty. What the new images revealed sent gasps of amazement and terror through the alien audience. Massive construction platforms orbited in the absolute darkness between star systems, completely invisible to traditional detection methods. These weren't simple manufacturing facilities. They were industrial complexes that dwarfed entire planets, their production capabilities exceeding anything in known galactic space. Asteroid mining operations stretched across multiple solar systems, feeding raw materials to automated foundries that operated continuously in the cold vacuum of deep space. Hidden in plain sight, David explained as the scale of human industrial capacity became apparent. While your attention remained focused on our primitive homeworld, we were constructing the largest manufacturing network in galactic history in the spaces you never thought to examine thoroughly. The evidence was staggering. Shipyards built inside hollowed-out asteroids could construct entire battle fleets without ever appearing on conventional sensors. Automated manufacturing systems operating in the gravitational shadows of gas giants produced advanced technology components at rates that made traditional production methods obsolete. Resource extraction operations harvested materials from rogue planets that drifted through interstellar space, completely invisible to galactic survey networks. Dark matter manipulation allowed us to construct facilities that exist partially outside normal space-time, David continued. Quantum tunneling manufacturing processes enabled production rates that exceed theoretical maximums for conventional industrial systems. Admiral Cora of the Stellar Defense Initiative, whose biomechanical implants interfaced directly with tactical analysis systems, studied the displays with growing incredulity. The coordination required, the resource allocation, the logistical complexity. No single species could achieve this level of industrial organization. You're absolutely correct, Admiral, David replied with a slight nod of acknowledgement, which is why we didn't limit our organizational efforts to a single world, or even a single star system. The holographic view expanded further, revealing the true scope of human expansion throughout the galaxy. What appeared to be empty space was actually filled with human settlements, research stations, and manufacturing facilities that had been operating in complete secrecy for decades. Rogue planets had been converted into hidden colonies. Asteroid belts contained entire cities built inside carefully hollowed spaces. Nebulae concealed research installations where exotic technologies were developed under conditions impossible to replicate elsewhere. 50 years of secret expansion, David stated. While the Dominion was evaluating our worthiness to survive, we were establishing the infrastructure necessary to ensure that survival was not dependent on their approval. The delegates watched in stunned silence as the recording showed human settlements thriving in environments that other species had dismissed as uninhabitable. Cities built inside the cores of dead stars, protected by energy fields that turned lethal radiation into usable power. Research complexes positioned in galactic voids, where scientists could experiment with space-time manipulation without risking interference with inhabited systems. Every location chosen for maximum concealment while optimizing resource availability, David explained. We learned to live and work in places where conventional sensors couldn't detect us, where traditional military forces couldn't follow us, where we could develop technologies that pushed beyond known scientific limitations. President Mira Thelon's bioluminescent patterns had shifted to colors that indicated deep philosophical crisis. The deception required maintaining this level of secrecy while developing capabilities that exceed established galactic standards. How is such coordination possible without detection? Because we understood something about galactic civilization that galactic civilization doesn't understand about itself, David replied. You operate according to predictable patterns. Your survey methods, your detection technologies, your analytical procedures, all of them follow established protocols that assume certain limitations on what's possible. New displays showed human intelligence operations that had been monitoring galactic detection methods for decades. Every sensor technology, every analytical algorithm, every investigation protocol used by galactic powers had been studied and systematically defeated through careful application of advanced stealth technologies, while you were developing better ways to find what you expected to be there, David continued. We were developing better ways to avoid being found by methods we knew you would use. We didn't just hide from your sensors, and we engineered our entire expansion to exploit the blind spots in your detection methodologies. The evidence showed human facilities that existed in the spaces between conventional sensor sweeps, settlements that operated using energy signatures designed to mimic natural phenomena, and manufacturing processes that left no waste products detectable by standard analysis procedures. Traditional military doctrine assumes that large-scale industrial operations cannot be hidden indefinitely, Admiral Cora observed, her biomechanical systems processing the tactical implications at superhuman speed. The energy expenditure alone should have created detectable signatures. Only if you're using conventional energy sources and traditional manufacturing processes, David replied. Humanity developed alternatives that operate outside the parameters your detection systems were designed to monitor. The displays showed power generation systems that harvested energy from black hole rotation, manufacturing processes that drew materials directly from quantum foam, and transportation networks that moved resources through pocket dimensions that existed outside normal space-time. Human engineering had transcended conventional limitations by working in environments where conventional physics operated. According to different rules, we built our civilization in the spaces between your understanding, David explained. Every assumption your science makes about what's possible became a limitation we learned to work around. High Chancellor Voltus, who had remained silent as the scope of human preparation became apparent, finally managed to speak. His voice carried none of its earlier authority, reduced to a whisper that the chamber's amplification system struggled to carry. The resources required, the technological advancement, the organizational complexity, this represents capabilities that exceed anything in recorded galactic history. Which brings us to the final lesson. The Dominion Empire failed to learn about humanity, David replied, his voice taking on a new edge of dangerous certainty. We don't just adapt, innovate, and unite. We transcend. The holographic displays shifted to show communication networks that spanned the entire human expansion. But these weren't traditional communication systems, Alma. They operated through quantum entanglement networks that enabled instantaneous coordination across galactic distances. Every human facility, every ship, every individual was connected in a web of shared consciousness that allowed for perfect coordination, without the delays inherent in conventional command structures. When your species faces extinction, when every member understands that failure means the end of everything you've ever been or ever could be, you don't just rise to meet the challenge, David continued. You transform into something capable of overcoming any obstacle placed in your path. 6 standard months after the Galactic Council's emergency session, Ambassador David Kane stood once again in the crystalline dome of the Judgment Chamber. The atmosphere was markedly different from his previous appearance, where once thousands of alien delegates had watched with hostility and fear. They now observed with a mixture of cautious respect and carefully concealed awe. The Dominion Empire's seats stood permanently empty, their civilization having collapsed completely under the sustained human assault. The systematic dismantling of their military infrastructure had been so thorough that entire star systems once under Dominion control now operated under interim human administration. But perhaps more significantly, the investigation into Dominion evaluation procedures had revealed similar programs being conducted by other galactic powers, sending shockwaves throughout the established order. President Mira Theln called the session to order, her bioluminescent patterns now displaying colors associated with cautious optimism rather than the crisis indicators that had dominated the previous months. The Council recognizes Ambassador Kane of the Terran Federation. The purpose of today's session is to formalize discussions regarding the new galactic situation and humanity's proposals for future interstellar governance. David nodded respectfully, his demeanor maintaining the same calm professionalism that had characterized his previous appearance. But there was something different in his bearing. A confidence that came not from having survived a crisis, but from having fundamentally reshaped the circumstances that created it. Thank you, President Theln. As promised during our previous session, all military action ceased the moment Dominion leadership surrendered unconditionally. Civilian populations from affected systems have been relocated to suitable worlds with full resource support and technological assistance to establish sustainable settlements. The holographic displays that materialized showed the aftermath of humanity's military campaign. Former Dominion worlds were thriving under human administration, with infrastructure improvements that exceeded anything the Empire had provided during centuries of occupation. Advanced medical facilities, educational institutions, and research centers had been established on every liberated world. War crimes tribunals are proceeding under established galactic law, David continued, with human observers present to ensure justice for our lost colonies and accountability for systematic evaluation procedures that violated every principle of peaceful coexistence. Admiral Cora, whose biomechanical analysis systems had been continuously monitoring human activities since the conflict ended, spoke with obvious bewilderment. Ambassador, the speed of reconstruction in former Dominion territories exceeds all theoretical models for post-conflict recovery. The resource allocation required for such comprehensive assistance programs represents a fraction of our current industrial capacity, David replied matter-of-factly. Admiral, the infrastructure we developed to prosecute the war against the Dominion was designed to support long-term galactic operations. With the immediate threat eliminated, those resources are now available for more constructive purposes. New displays showed the true scope of human reconstruction efforts. Automated manufacturing systems that had produced weapons of war were now creating hospitals, schools, and research facilities at unprecedented rates. The same logistical networks that had coordinated military campaigns were delivering humanitarian aid with efficiency that made traditional disaster response methods obsolete. However, David continued, his tone shifting to indicate the introduction of more complex topics. The Dominion's elimination has created certain power vacuums in galactic affairs that require careful consideration. Trade routes that need protection, border disputes that require mediation, scientific research that must continue for the benefit of all species. The holographic map of galactic territories updated to show current administrative zones. Large sections previously controlled by the Dominion now displayed human oversight. But these weren't conquest zones or occupied territories. They were administrative regions where human technology was facilitating the establishment of democratic governance structures and free trade agreements. The Terran Federation has temporarily assumed responsibility for these regions to ensure stability during the transition period, David explained. We are implementing democratic governance protocols, establishing free trade networks, and making our advanced technologies available for peaceful applications. Councillor Plex of the Trade Consortium leaned forward with obvious nervousness. The economic implications of humanity's technological capabilities had sent shockwaves through galactic commerce that were still being felt across multiple sectors. Ambassador, when you say temporarily, what specific timeline are we discussing? David's expression showed genuine warmth for the first time since entering the chamber. Councillor, humanity did not fight this war for territorial expansion or galactic dominion. We fought for survival and justice. Our ultimate goal remains the same as it was 50 years ago. To earn our place in a peaceful galactic community where all species can coexist without fear of extinction level. Evaluations. The display shifted to show proposed new governance structures that challenged every assumption about how galactic civilization should operate. Enhanced council representation that included voting rights for all spacefaring species, regardless of technological development. mandatory intervention protocols when any species faced systematic extermination, universal access to advanced technologies that could eliminate resource scarcity across the galaxy. We propose a fundamental restructuring of galactic governance, David announced. A new charter for the Galactic Council that prioritizes the protection and advancement of all species rather than maintaining the dominance of established powers. The assembled delegates studied the proposals with growing amazement. These weren't the demands of a conquering power seeking to impose its will on defeated enemies. They were the comprehensive reforms of a civilization that had transcended traditional limitations and was offering to share those advantages with the entire galactic community. Enhanced oversight of first contact procedures to prevent future evaluation protocols, David continued. Mandatory transparency in interspecies diplomatic relations. And most importantly, representation for all spacefaring species in decisions that affect galactic stability and development. Science Coordinator Telm's crystalline form flickered, with patterns indicating intense cognitive processing. Ambassador, the technologies you're proposing to share, the manufacturing capabilities, the energy generation systems, the transportation networks, releasing these to all galactic species would fundamentally alter the balance of power throughout known space. Exactly, David replied with conviction that resonated through the chamber's amplification systems. Coordinator, the current balance of power is based on artificial scarcity and technological inequality. Advanced species maintain control by limiting access to technologies that could elevate less developed civilizations. This system creates the conditions that make evaluation procedures seem rational to those who implement them. The holographic displays showed humanity's vision for galactic civilization. Future, where every species had access to the technologies necessary for prosperity and defense. Resource scarcity would become obsolete through advanced manufacturing techniques. Interstellar travel would be available to all species through shared transportation networks. Scientific advancement would accelerate through cooperative research programs that pooled the intellectual resources of the entire galaxy. Traditional galactic politics operates on the assumption that advancement is zero-sum, David explained, that one species can only prosper at the expense of others. Humanity's technological capabilities prove that this assumption is false. When artificial limitations are removed, the entire galaxy benefits from increased prosperity and stability. President Thelon's bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors associated with deep philosophical consideration. Ambassador, these proposals are remarkably progressive. But what assurance does the galactic community have that humanity won't follow the Dominion's path toward empire? Your military capabilities clearly exceed anything in recorded history. David gestured toward the tactical displays, which now showed human military forces in defensive positions around former Dominion worlds, protecting rather than conquering the populations they had liberated. President, the assurance lies in the lessons we learned from our own near extinction. His voice carried the weight of absolute conviction as he continued. We remember what it felt like to watch our colonies burn while the galaxy stood by and did nothing. We remember the desperation of facing extinction, while more powerful species debated whether we deserved to survive. No species should ever face that situation alone again. The evidence supported his words. Human military forces were operating as protective fleets rather than occupation armies. Advanced defensive technologies were being shared freely with species that had previously been vulnerable to aggression. The same intelligence networks that had penetrated galactic security systems were now being used to identify and prevent potential conflicts before they could escalate.